The story begins with a beautiful night sky, a soft breeze in the air, and a letter written by the female lead. It reads, "To my dearest Adela, how are you? I heard the good news from father. He told me that you had a beautiful wedding with the prince of your dreams. Wouldn't it be grand if I could one day marry the person I love, just like you? You must be wondering why I, someone who has never had a suitor, am speaking of such things out of nowhere. Well, actually, I have a blissful secret. And I want to share it with you and only you. I have fallen in love. Love, the matters of the heart are deep." In the next scene, the camera pans to a dimly lit bedroom where two young people share an intimate moment. The female lead asks the young man, "How can I show you that I truly love you?" He smiles softly and replies, "It's quite simple." Carlix gently asks her to open her mouth. She does, and the two kiss. The girl is completely lost in love. She's got every reason to be. The man she's fallen for is absolutely perfect in her eyes. He's the knight who always picks flowers for her, speaks to her with such sweet words, and treats her like royalty. Carlix is her Prince Charming, straight out of a fairy tale, her knight in shining armor who came to rescue her. And she's head over heels for him. The handmaidens cling to the door, trying their best to eavesdrop on what's happening behind it. One of them asks if they should send word to the capital and inform the Duke about what they're hearing. The two women whisper anxiously to each other, sure that the Duke has no idea what his innocent daughter is being subjected to. If he found out, he'd surely be furious. One of the handmaidens mentions that Tom left with a letter just yesterday, and it should reach the Duke soon. But another handmaiden responds that it'll take at least 2 weeks for the letter to reach him, which is far too long. She then asks her colleague if they should intervene and stop the situation in the meantime. But the other quickly rushes over, clamping a hand over her mouth. She warns her to be careful with what she says. There's a reason every maid in the young mistress's tower wears a black ribbon around their necks. It's because the Duke doesn't hesitate to execute anyone who speaks too freely about his daughter. Talk about strict. Not a single soul working in the young Mistress Ella's castle dares to speak out. Yet one of her fellow handmaidens remains unfazed, saying she can't just stand by and watch as the young mistress is taken advantage of. She can't believe this is happening, even to someone as notoriously wicked as the prince. She wonders how he could do something so horrible to their mistress, especially since Ella is none other than his wife's younger sister. It's shocking, and just thinking about it feels like everything's messed up. But, as they say, time will tell. This is the Empire of Oriet, the land of gold and brilliance, where a major event is taking place at the palace. The people gather to honor their goddess Stella for her grace, bowing in reverence as the golden royal engagement ceremony unfolds. Among the royals present are Alex Oriet, the first prince, and Asher Lopez, the golden saint. Their union is blessed in the name of goddess Stella. The priest bestows his blessing upon Lady Asher, the saint, as she leads the royal family and Prince Alex toward a glorious future. The royal betrothal is blessed in front of many witnesses. In the Empire of Oriet, everything revolves around the emperor and goddess Stella, a belief passed down through generations. The founding emperor established the Oriet Empire with the help of the goddess of the stars. Each new emperor is given a single daughter with golden hair, destined to become his empress. The golden-haired child is revered as the goddess incarnate. It is said that the Oriet Empire is promised eternal prosperity as long as the chosen empress remains at the throne. This is the culture of the Oriet people. It's been this way for generations, and it's how they hope it will stay. The people celebrate Lady Asher as the newest chosen empress and even ask for her blessing. Hooray for Lady Asher! Hooray for Prince Alex! A few commoners chat about the golden-haired lady. One says that once she becomes empress, the long-lasting famine will finally end. The other man shrugs and says he isn't too worried about the famine. What really bothers him is hearing that the town of Naiju has fallen to monsters. He blames the dark-haired empress for all the misfortune. Dark hair? Isn't that totally against their belief here in Oriet? It's downright unnatural. The empress of the Oriet Empire is Isabella Oriet. Two men atop a building also discuss the situation. One of them says that he thought the engagement ceremony would put an end to the rivalry for the throne between the two princes. With this engagement, Prince Alex will surely become the next emperor. The other man turns toward him and says that, in his view, Prince Carlix has already been out of the picture ever since his mother's family was destroyed. He's surprised the Empress has kept Prince Carlix alive, seeing as he's her stepson. He asks his friend if he thinks the Empress sees Prince Carlix as family. His friend scoffs and says he doubts it. It's not going to be that simple. The prince has always been a weapon in the hands of the Empress, a mercenary for the Empire. He's been sent to fight countless battles, defeating monsters once thought unbeatable. They call it battle, but he's really just been cleaning up after monsters that attack villages. One of the men comments that the prince is no better than a glorified servant, sent out time and time again to die in battle. Yet, he always comes back victorious. He is His Highness Prince Carlix, the dark-haired, battle-hardened warrior. Word reaches Prince Carlix on the battlefield, informing him that he's been urgently summoned by the Empress to the palace. He wonders why his stepmother would call for him. It's certainly not to congratulate him on Alex's betrothal, he thinks, letting out a smirk. His subordinate quickly corrects him, it's the Emperor. The Emperor has collapsed. That sounds urgent enough. Carlix makes his way to the palace and kneels to honor the Empress in the throne room, where Alex and his bride-to-be are also present. Empress Isabella casually mentions that she had arranged the betrothal between Alex and Lady Asher while Carlix was away, hoping he's not too disappointed. Carlix doesn't really see a reason to be upset, except for the little history he shares with Lady Asher. The two share a brief, tense moment, and she quickly looks away. Carlix smirks, saying he traveled all the way back upon hearing of his father's illness, but the Empress greets him with news he couldn't care less about. Isabella flinches slightly at his words but recovers, saying she has personally chosen a bride for him as well. Oh boy, this is definitely not going to end well. The Empress explains that while Carlix might be a bastard, he is still royal blood and the son of the Emperor, so he can't just marry anyone. His bride will be Adela Campbell, the daughter of Duke Campbell from the north. The name sounds familiar to Carlix. He mentions he heard that Lady Adela passed away after succumbing to illness. Alex jumps in, telling his brother not to believe unfounded rumors and insult the Duke's perfectly respectable daughter. He encourages Carlix not to be discouraged, after all, she's a noble. He asks if Carlix doesn't feel some sympathy for the sickly young lady, who has been battling illness and hasn't had the chance to marry. Leaning closer to his stepbrother, Alex whispers that Carlix could just be the perfect remedy for her condition. He mocks Carlix, saying that if he were Lady Campbell, he'd probably rise from the grave just to escape this. Carlix remains calm, but his anger simmers beneath the surface. He knows exactly what they're trying to do, use his father's sudden illness as an excuse to send him away. Alex gets to his feet and wishes his little brother a pleasant honeymoon. Carlix, though, has a dangerous look in his eyes. He'd love nothing more than to wipe that smirk off Alex's face right then and there, but he refrains, he's not about to turn the throne room into a bloodbath. Night falls, and the scene shifts to a new location, Duke Campbell's castle. Inside, our female lead, Elena, sits alone in the moonlight, crying uncontrollably. The door creaks open, making her jump at the sudden movement. Someone steps inside, standing before her, it's her father, Duke Campbell. The air around him feels heavy and cold, and it's clear he's not here with good intentions. She trembles as he places a hand on her head and asks if she's had time to think about her actions. Tears continue to roll down her cheeks as Elena begs for his forgiveness. Duke Campbell demands to hear her say, with her own lips, what she did wrong. She cries harder, her gaze fixed on the ground as she begs again. Her father grabs her by the hair, growling, "Answer me." Her voice shakes as she finally responds, explaining that she just wanted to go outside the castle and visit the village. That's it. No more, no less. It shouldn't be such a big deal, but things are about to take an even darker turn. Duke Campbell yanks her hair and warns her never to even think about leaving the castle again, or she'll be locked in her room. He's terrifying. Is he really her father? What's so wrong with wanting to leave? He walks away, leaving her crumpled on the ground. Elena trembles, staring at the floor for several long moments. Finally, she picks up a piece of paper and starts writing furiously, the sound of her pen screeching as she scribbles. In the letter, she writes to her sister, Adela, asking why she hasn't responded to her letters. Everyone else avoids Elena, no one willing to meet her gaze. She breaks down again, crying. How is it possible that someone so beautiful and so important to the Duke is treated this horribly? Elena calls out for her sister. She can't go on like this. She feels like she's losing her mind. In frustration, she rips the letter to pieces. What's the point of writing 1, 10, or even 100 letters if Adela won't answer? Elena screams out loud, not limiting her call for help to just her sister. She pleads for anyone and everyone to hear her. She can't stand being alone anymore. All she wants is just one word, one glance. She begs to be rescued from the prison that is her home. Who will save her from this bondage? 3 months later, still within the Duke's territory, a group of riders gallops into town, making their way toward the Duke's castle. It's Prince Carlix and his men. He looks around with a smile, taking in the surroundings. This is the place. He wears that cold, determined expression once again, like a man on a mission. This is where he'll find his future wife. It's only just the beginning. Wedding bells ring loudly in the temple hall, signaling the ceremony. The priest stands ready to join the young prince and his bride, but something feels off. The groom stands alone at the altar. His bride is nowhere to be seen. The priest proceeds, undeterred, with the ceremony in the absence of Adela Campbell. He declares that Carlix Oriet is joined to her by the grace of their goddess, Stella. He pronounces them husband and wife. It is done. The young prince smirks, remarking that it's almost comedic to have a wedding without a bride. Duke Campbell apologizes, explaining that his daughter's condition worsened today, and she couldn't attend. He sighs, lamenting that it's unfortunate because he was looking forward to seeing Lady Adela in her wedding dress. The Duke says they couldn't ask the priest to wait any longer since he had come all the way from the capital for the ceremony. Postponing wasn't an option. The priest clears his throat at the Duke's words. Prince Carlix comments that bringing in a real prince for such a mockery of a wedding is a waste on a royal scale. The Duke bristles at his words, clearly offended. Carlix's sharp tongue never fails to make an impact. The Duke wonders if the young master is being brave or just plain foolish with the way he speaks. To smooth things over, the Duke offers a wedding gift from his daughter, saying it's her way of apologizing. It's a flower ring, crafted from special flowers from their castle garden. The Duke is quick to boast, but Carlix isn't convinced. It sounds a little too convenient. The young prince is stunned to receive something from his absent bride. A crown made of shrubs? This is his wedding gift? He finds it deeply offensive. It's almost like the Duke is intentionally disrespecting him. The handmaidens behind them snicker, clearly amused by the situation. Duke Campbell laughs heartily, asking if the prince doesn't like his gift. He suggests Carlix can always ask Adela for something else if the flower crown is too grand for him. The audacity of this man! Duke Campbell goes on to say that while there are plenty of flowers in the garden, this one seems most fitting for his new son-in-law. Prince Carlix is fuming, but he manages to keep his composure. He grabs the crown of flowers, saying it's just fine and that it'll have to do. He notes that it's a pretty meager gift, but will accept it regardless. He asks his new father-in-law to pass along his thanks to his wife, Lady Adela, before tossing the crown to the ground and stomping on it as he takes his leave. These two in-laws are certainly in for an eventful ride. Duke Campbell wonders what's going through the prince's mind. Here he is, cast out to this faraway place, barely allowed to live. Did the prince even realize his reality? If it weren't for the Empress's order, Duke Campbell would never have accepted someone like Carlix as a son-in-law. He looks down on him, seeing him as nothing more than a bastard, unworthy of royal blood. The Duke sees the young prince as an ungrateful, arrogant fool. The next scene unfolds in the Duke's castle. Carlix is training with a few members of his squad. They're still reeling from the fact that he simply walked away after being insulted. One of the ladies, Kelly, a knight under Carlix's command, is fuming. She can't believe he had to endure a brideless wedding. She thinks it's outrageous. She points out that Carlix still hasn't even seen his wife's face since arriving. Carlix responds that it's just the way it is because that's how little they think of him. He's shirtless and dripping sweat, the massive scar on his chest telling the story of the brutal battles he's fought in his lifetime. Kelly can't believe how the Duke is treating His Highness like this. He's just a Duke with an empty title, she exclaims. Another squad member, Gavin, steps in to calm her down. But Kelly won't budge. She's too angry at the way they're treating their prince, someone they all hold in high regard. Gavin tells her to calm down, pointing out that she's being unprofessional. After all, as a knight, she's been trained to mask hostility toward their opponents. He glances around and says they need to keep their intentions hidden and observe quietly. Gavin looks every bit the seasoned warrior, with a massive scar across his face to match. He is the 16th knight under Carlix's command. Judging by the number of knights around Carlix, there are definitely many more who follow him. Carlix tells them both to relax. Everything happening now was to be expected, he says. His scheming stepmother and stepbrother never meant well by sending him here. They're taking advantage of his father's serious illness, and he's not surprised by any of it. Kelly says she's not particularly surprised either, though she didn't think the royals would go this far. As dangerous as things are now, she admits they were better off on the battlefield, fighting for their lives every day, than being stuck here. It's risky to be in a place where they could be ambushed at any moment. At least on the battlefield, they weren't disrespected. Kelly crosses her arms, clearly unhappy about the young master's marriage. Just then, someone approaches the squad. He introduces himself as Jacob, the prince's assigned humble servant, and offers to show Prince Carlix around the castle. The prince is ready for a little adventure and agrees to go now. As they walk, Carlix notices something odd, the same flowers that were given to him as a wedding gift, the very ones Duke Campbell had used to make that crown. He asks Jacob what the flowers are called, determined to get a straight answer. Jacob hesitates, then explains they're flowers that grow all around the estate. They're well known to the locals, growing practically everywhere. Carlix isn't buying the story and presses him for the name of the flower. Jacob flinches, his voice trembling as he admits the flowers are just common weeds. The prince turns toward him with fury in his eyes. So, Duke Campbell had gone this far to insult him, huh? It seems the Duke wasn't intimidated by a battle-hardened warrior like Carlix. Later that night, in the garden, a golden-haired young lady sits by herself. She is Elena Campbell, the Duke's second daughter, our female lead. In her hand, she holds the same flower. She says she made a flower crown for her sister Adela and smiles, thinking the wedding must have been a beautiful ceremony. She really hopes her sister liked the gift. To Elena, these aren't just common weeds. They're long-lasting flowers, and she's sure they stayed fresh for the ceremony. It's always been her dream for the flower crown to help make Adela shine as beautifully as possible on her big day. Little does she know, it was a brideless wedding and Adela never even got the gift. It's heartbreaking because Elena made it with so much love. She really is a sweet soul. Our male lead and Elena haven't crossed paths yet. How will their story unfold? Is Adela still alive? These questions swirl in my head. Elena sits in the castle garden, lost in thought late at night. She wishes she could have attended her sister's wedding, but she knew asking her father would have upset him. As she gazes around the garden, she notices something unsettling. Countless flowers have been ripped out by the roots. She remembers back when she was just a little girl, wondering where all the beautiful flowers from the castle garden had gone. She once asked a handmaiden about a particular yellow flower that was missing, showing just how much she cared about the flowers. The handmaiden explains that the flowers were overgrown, so the Duke had them removed. She mentions that these flowers were particularly hard to kill and tend to sprout again every so often. The way they handled it was almost like disciplining an impudent child. Anything that got too wild in the garden was completely uprooted. Little Miss Elena loved the beautiful flowers, almost as though she had a special connection to them. She notices the leaves are fading and says the flowers were fine until recently. She smells them, hoping they'll recover. Unfortunately, things didn't go as she'd hoped. The moldy flowers she wished would bounce back were pulled from the garden before they had a chance to spring up again. They withered and died, like they'd never been there at all. Elena stood silently over the dead flowers, as if holding a small funeral for them. What could have happened to these flowers? They say that just like people, flowers have their fates decided for them. Was it the sudden change of heart from the gardener, or something else, that sealed the flower's fate? This thought clouded Elena's heart as she wondered if her own fate was as fragile as those flowers. She couldn't help but feel that she was no different from them, as her father held the key to her future. She gazed at the sky, accepting the fact that she took longer to bloom. If her father ever became disappointed in her, she too would be cast aside, like those flowers. A cruel reality, but one she had already made peace with. In the next scene, Elena sits in a bath filled with sparkling yellow flowers. It looks almost magical. The handmaidens whisper among themselves, one saying she never thought she'd see it with her own eyes. Another remarks that she's only ever heard rumors about such an aromatic oil. The third asks if the oil is really made from fairy flowers, as people claim. The maids gossip, amazed at the rare and expensive oil being used for the young mistress's bath. They talk about the fairy flower, saying a tiny bottle could buy an entire estate. It's a rare flower that blooms in the forest at a fateful moment, and the oil extracted from it is said to be used by the fairy queen herself. According to the legend, if an innocent child bathes in the oil made from this flower, they will have flawless, blemish-free skin as white as the first snow. As the chosen child grows, she will bloom into a woman as fragrant as the fairy flower itself. One of the handmaidens laughs, scoffing at the tale. She calls it a fable and says she believes the oil is just something the noble mistresses favor. She adds that even if it was gifted to her, she wouldn't use it. Her colleague disagrees, saying it's unlikely because of how rare the oil is. She accuses the first handmaiden of being jealous. The first handmaiden denies it, though she admits to envying the highborn ladies. Yeah, she's totally jealous of Elena. The handmaiden wishes she were born into an aristocratic family, one where she could bathe in fairy flower oil and eat whatever she wanted. Maybe then she would have secured a marriage contract with the Duke of the North. Her colleague teases her, suggesting that luck might not have been on her side, and she could have ended up married to a fat, ugly baron notorious for his perversion, all for convenience. This, she says, is the reality of female nobility. The first handmaiden gets offended but laughs it off, saying she was only joking. The maidens giggle as they leave, but before they go, one of them asks if bathing in that oil really makes men fall head over heels. The colleague says she's heard that it does. The three of them giggle as they exit the scene. Meanwhile, Elena sits in the tub, pondering the conversation she just overheard. She looks at the shimmering water she's soaking in, the water that's supposed to turn her into a woman all men covet. Do such things really exist? The thought makes her stomach turn. Her father has always told her she was destined to be the woman of the emperor. It was his lifelong dream. The Duke had repeatedly told little Elena that she had to be perfect for the emperor, that she needed to be flawless in his eyes, even if she felt like a flawed girl. She grew up with this idea embedded in her mind. She was groomed to be the emperor's lady. It was only a matter of time. Her father raised her to be immaculate, like a doll. To him, she was just a prized possession to be traded. He would certainly banish her if she ever disappointed him. That's why she sees herself as no different from those flowers that turned into weeds in the blink of an eye. Later, Elena meets with her father. He tells her about her sister's successful wedding ceremony. Duke Campbell says that her brother-in-law, Prince Carlix, liked the floral crown Elena made. That's a blatant lie. Her eyes brighten, and she smiles with a sense of relief. Her father goes on to say that although the craftsmanship was poor, Prince Carlix accepted it anyway. He adds that the wedding was amazing, thanks to Elena. More lies. Blatant lies. Elena starts sweating, sensing sarcasm in her father's tone. She notices the smirk on his face, so she asks if she put her sister in a difficult position with her choice of present. Her heart starts racing. She feels like she's made a terrible mistake by making the crown. She wants to apologize to Adela and asks her father's permission to visit her sister. She's worried she might have caused trouble. The Duke, however, is not interested in that idea. He shouts in disapproval. Duke Campbell asks if Elena intended to ruin Adela's honeymoon, claiming the newlyweds should be enjoying a blissful time right now. He gives a maniacal laugh, saying they should all hope the prince and his bride have an unforgettable wedding. Something definitely seems off here. The halls of the castle are eerily silent and dark. Prince Carlix stumbles down the hallway, heavily drunk, swinging a bottle as he goes. Earlier, Jacob had informed him of Lady Adela's worsening health. He said her condition was so dire she couldn't even attend her own wedding, and now it's getting worse. The servant warns the prince that if she were to pass without giving him an heir, Carlix would be stuck here for life as a powerless son-in-law to the Duke. Jacob adds that unless Carlix fathers a child with Campbell blood, the Duke would never consider him an heir to the family's title. The young master's chances of truly belonging in the Campbell family are slim, but Jacob assures him the Duke can't banish Carlix without cause, since he's still royal blood. Lady Kelly stops Jacob from saying more. Carlix smirks and says they've got nothing to worry about. He's certain the Duke never meant for him to stay here long. Carlix chuckles, adding that it's only natural to dispose of a stud horse that can't serve its purpose. Stumbling forward, he mutters to himself as he continues down the hall. He's got a wife who gave him shrubs as a wedding present, and he's finally going to see her tonight after the long wait. Since his arrival, his bride has been nowhere to be found, even on their wedding night. He decides to find her himself. Jacob had shown him to her room earlier, and Carlix asks why he was shown to his wife's room if he couldn't see her. Jacob explains that Lady Adela is gravely ill and can't meet him, and the healer has prohibited visitors. Carlix demands to know why he was shown the room if he couldn't enter. Jacob says it was an order from the Duke to show him to his wife's door. Carlix sighs, saying a mere door separates him from his wife. It's a pitiful situation for a newlywed couple. As he turns to leave, he looks back at the door, filled with questions. Is Adela really in there? Is she being kept away because of her illness, or is there something more to it? His mind races with doubt. In his drunken haze, he wonders why the Duke would show him a room he couldn't enter. As much as he hates playing into his father-in-law's hands, Carlix doesn't trust the Duke, and he doesn't have the patience to wait until his sick wife can explain what's going on. Why is she confined to her room? The young master stands right in front of her door. It's time to get some answers. Prince Carlix lays his hand on the door handle and slowly pushes it open. The door creaks, and he steps inside. The room is filled with covered furniture, all draped with linen. He can feel it deep down. The room has been abandoned for a long time. Scattered around, he notices a pile of letters, all addressed to Adela. He picks one up, opens it, and reads aloud, "Dra, how are you feeling? I am writing as I cannot go to see you myself. From Ella." He tosses the letter aside. Ara must be Adela's pet name, but he's not interested in that. Even in his drunken haze, the moment he steps into the room, he feels a heavy sense of desolation and stillness. The thick dust covering everything tells him the room hasn't been lived in for ages. Despite the overpowering stench of liquor on his breath, there's another scent in the air, an overwhelming, unmistakable smell of death. He walks over to a large frame covered with a red cloak and pulls it off. It's a portrait of Lady Adela. He takes a good look at her and mutters, noticing that she has her father's eyes. "We can skip the introductions," he says, "she's far from the world of the living." This was Lady Adela, the only daughter of Duke Campbell. But wait, wasn't Elena his blood? Back at the wedding ceremony, Carlix had insisted on his bride attending, despite her illness. It seems he truly doubted she was alive at all. He had hoped that, at the very least, he would be honored by her presence. The Duke had teased him then, saying that only a musician or poet as great as the legendary Orpheus would be able to get his daughter to the ceremony. Adela loves good music, the Duke had said with a laugh. Now, Carlix puts the pieces together. The Duke mentioned Orpheus because he had successfully married his dead daughter to Carlix. Pig villainy, indeed. A fiery rage surged within Prince Carlix. His throat burnt with fury, and an icy shiver ran down his spine. He swore the Duke would pay for this. This was too much for him to forgive. Now that Prince Carlix thinks about it, his brother was right all along. He had mocked him in the throne room, but now he's discovered the truth. A wild laugh bursts from Carlix. It's almost manic as he laughs at the whole situation, plotting his next move in his mind. He wonders if he should wipe out every single one of them. It's not beyond him, after all. Crazy, right? But this is a man of war and brutality we're talking about. Thankfully, he's a tactical genius, so he doesn't make rash decisions. Meanwhile, Elena continues her conversation with her father. She asks about her new brother-in-law, wanting to know what he's really like. Duke Campbell says he's just your typical prince, nothing more, nothing less. But his view of the young master is much darker than he lets on to Elena. To him, Carlix is a bastard of lowly blood, the son of a tragic revolt. His mother's side was wiped out, and his chance to claim the throne was stolen by his half-brother. The young master is a half-blood who survived the bloody massacre of his relatives. A prince born of tragedy. It's no surprise he turned out the way he did. The Duke sees him as nothing more than a boy with a rusty sword, convinced the young master will achieve nothing in his castle and domain. Back at his own location, Prince Carlix is furious, seething over the disrespect the Duke has shown him. At this point, his father-in-law is practically his arch-nemesis. The Duke wants nothing but failure for him. Carlix wonders if the Duke ever really believed he could become emperor. He never intended to hand his daughter over to the prince, not even in death. That's how little he thinks of Carlix. A dark aura surrounds Carlix as he smirks. This was the plan all along. Everyone wants to see him fail, his mother, his brother, and now the Duke. The Duke's mission is clear, he wants Carlix to rot here and die a miserable death. But Carlix has made a decision. He'll take everything from the Duke. He laughs maniacally. His mission is clear, become emperor, and everything Duke Campbell has will be the stepping stones to the throne. Things are about to get intense. Meanwhile, in the next scene, Elena sits in the sunlight, radiating beauty. She's thinking about the prince, her new brother-in-law, and the newest member of their family. She truly believes it was a wonderful wedding for him and her sister. From her window, she sees a crowd gathered, likely because of the wedding ceremony. She feels a pang of sadness. Moments like these only make her resent her father even more. She's locked away in her room, all because of him. Since the moment Elena was born with golden hair, things have always been this way. She doesn't blame her father for being protective, but her reality feels more and more suffocating. Golden hair is rare, and only the emperor is supposed to have it. That's what her father drilled into her from the start. He told her no one should know about her golden hair because people might try to steal it or even abduct her, selling her as a slave. In some strange, twisted way, Elena believed her father was just trying to protect her out of love. But let's be real, nobody who loves you locks you up in a castle your entire life. Despite the fact that her father forbade her from leaving, meeting people, or even talking to anyone, she somehow managed to live with it because she wasn't completely alone. The Duke allowed her to speak with her sister, Adela. The two were really close, often talking about adventures and mystical sights beyond the castle walls. Adela had once told her about some strange flowers she'd love for her bridal bouquet when the time came, and Elena had been fascinated by the idea of seeing those flowers in person. They'd laugh together, imagining it all. Adela had even suggested Elena go out one day to see the flowers for herself. But the thought of it only made Elena sad. Their father never let her leave the castle. Her sister reassured her, saying that it wouldn't always be this way. There would come a time when Elena could leave and come as she pleased. That time hadn't come yet. It had been so long since the two sisters had seen each other in person. Elena folded in on herself, missing Adela terribly. As it was, no one talked to her. It felt like everyone hated her there. She wondered why they had a garden full of flowers all year round when the castle was so empty. It was all so lonely. Things weren't much better outside the castle. The people struggled under the harsh climate and the monster attacks ever since the dark-haired empress had arrived. The estate was barely surviving, only staying afloat from the profits made off the monsters they defeated. The casualties from the battles were staggering, and the estate's situation was only getting worse. This report came from one of the knights. Prince Carlix was stunned. He couldn't understand why luxury goods were still entering the estate if things were really that bad. It didn't make sense. The Duke didn't seem to be living a lavish life, so where was all this wealth coming from? Rose, one of Carlix's knights, suggested the Duke might be hiding treasure in a secret stash somewhere in his inner castle. Apparently, the Duke had a remote castle with a tower to the right of his main estate. No one who'd ever gone into the castle had come back out. The young prince saw it as a challenge. One he was more than ready to accept and conquer. Kelly says there are all kinds of rumors floating around about the castle, like the Duke hiding treasure and even keeping a monster at his command. Of course, these are just rumors since no one who's ever gone into that castle has come back. The stories say the monster devours anyone who dares enter. Prince Carlix isn't scared of rumors, though. He wants the truth, and he's ready to face whatever it takes to get it. He's curious about what Duke Campbell is hiding and says they should all be hoping something exciting is waiting for them. He smirks, as if he's the villain in his own story. Will the prince face a monster soon? Maybe it's a dragon. Will he overcome it and get revenge on the Duke and the royal family? Only time will tell. Meanwhile, the young mistress stands there, eyes wide in shock. There's definitely something off about this place. Not too far from her, a handmaiden is crying hysterically. Elena calls out to her. The handmaiden, named and turns toward the sound of her name. But her eyes are completely white, almost like a ghost, and tears are streaming down her face. Anne asks why Elena betrayed her, why she forsook her. A dark aura surrounds her as she lets out an eerie, inhuman sound. Anne accuses the young mistress of breaking a promise, one that if kept, would have spared Anne's life. That's a pretty spooky thought. The image of Anne's execution is burned into Elena's memory. She sees Anne hanging from a rope, lifeless, hanging there, and continues to accuse Elena, saying everyone in the tower resents her. The sight terrifies Elena. The little girl is being blamed for all the misfortune. And goes on, saying that everyone lost their voices and their families because of Elena's selfishness. She calls the young mistress conceited. Elena is paralyzed in fear. The weight of the accusations is too much for a young girl to process. With her hands covering her face, she wakes up in her bed, drenched in sweat and tears. It's the present day now, and Elena is gasping for breath. The ghost of Anne has been visiting her in her dreams since she was a child, haunting her with these nightmares. She's had the same terrifying encounter once or twice a week, every week. It's been years, and it feels like the nightmares never stop. Elena feels like this haunting is meant to make her never forget the mistake she made all those years ago. What a chilling way to live. Elena sits in bed, trembling with fear. She cries out for someone to come, pleading for the lights to be kept on. She calls for her handmaidens, but there's no response. In a panic, she jumps to her feet, grabs a candle holder, and throws it to the ground. Next, she snatches a tablecloth and smashes a piece of tableware. The noise draws the handmaidens rushing into her room. They heard the crash, but ignored her calls. It's strange. Elena, now furious, demands to know why it took them so long to answer. The ladies stay silent. It's unsettling. The young mistress makes her displeasure known, and it's only when she starts breaking things that they finally show up. Why? She asks, why does she have to destroy things to get their attention? She rushes toward them, grabbing one of the handmaidens in an unexpected hug. The handmaiden doesn't react. Elena says she dreamt of Anne again. In the dream, Anne's ghost told her that everyone in the tower hated her. She begs the handmaiden to tell her it's not true. It can't be true, can it? That every single person in this castle despises her? She asks the maid to comfort her, at least tell her it's just a nightmare. But no words come from the handmaiden. It's like they're all mute. In the nightmare, Anne had called the young mistress a brat who deserves to be alone, even when she's sad. Elena refuses to accept that as her reality. Surely, there's someone who loves her, right? She's convinced that her father and Adela are the ones who fill the emptiness in her heart. She pleads with the handmaiden to speak, ordering her to say that there are people who love her. Elena says she's terrified, that she feels something is in the room, something out to get her. She insists she's seen a dark figure in the corner of the room and something else by the bed and even in the closet. She looks genuinely afraid. The young mistress locks eyes with the handmaiden, stating that she's losing her mind, and won't stop screaming at her, reminding her that everyone hates her. Despite Elena's distress, the handmaiden doesn't offer any comfort. Instead, she looks at her with disgust. And that's when it hits Elena. It must be true, everyone in the tower hates her. Even her handmaidens don't care. And words echo in her mind, no one will comfort her, not even after a nightmare. It's been this way for a long time. Elena is deeply scarred by the repeated cycle of isolation and fear. Every time Elena throws a tantrum, the handmaidens just stare at her with the same fearful expression. It's not anger or pity, it's irritation. Their eyes speak volumes. Elena shoves one of them away and demands to know what she did wrong. Why do they all treat her so coldly? Still, the handmaiden says nothing. Instead, she grits her teeth in disdain. Elena screams that she knows they don't like her, but she's not some pest to be ignored. She asks why they can't just be honest with her. What's the problem? What is it that angers them all? Elena says she'd rather they yell at her or hit her than act like this. She collapses onto the floor, clutching her head, tears falling down her face. She asks if she really hasn't been punished enough. When will it end? When will they stop hating her? Slowly, one by one, the handmaidens leave. They step out, one in front of the other, leaving her to cry alone. Elena pleads for them to stay. She doesn't want to be left alone, not with the ghost haunting her thoughts. It's become a routine. Whenever Elena dreams of Anne, she goes to the garden, no matter the time. The flowers there felt like better company than the servants who barely hid their disdain for her. At least the flowers didn't stare at her with judgment. She found a strange kind of solace there, even if it was fleeting. But still, it was never enough. When Elena realized her life was just as lonely and confined as the flowers she spent time with, she couldn't escape the dark thoughts that crept into her mind whenever she visited the garden. Kneeling in the middle of the flowers, she stared into the night sky, hoping for something to change. As a child, she dreamed of leaving the castle and going to the Emperor's palace, where things would surely be different. She hoped for freedom, for a life that wasn't defined by loneliness. Now, older and wiser, all she felt was sadness. She looked up at the stars, feeling the weight of her reality crushing her. The Emperor's castle would be just another prison, another place where she'd be locked away, left to die alone. She accepted it in her heart, feeling the tears burn in her eyes. Her sister, Adela, flashed across her mind, and she clenched her fist in despair. She might never see her again. She might never come back to this garden either. But leaving wouldn't make things better. The thoughts clouded her mind, drowning her in a sorrow she couldn't escape. Elena grabs her golden hair, the very thing she believes has cursed her life. If it weren't for her unusual hair color, the Duke might have let her leave the castle by now. She hates everything about her situation. With a cry of frustration, she screams in pain. It feels like she's been cursed, and in a way, she has. Her golden hair, once thought of as a blessing, has only shaped her life into a prison. She sobs uncontrollably, regretting the day she was born. This is the lowest point of her life, and she's convinced she'd be better off never stepping into this world. Just then, she hears a rustling sound. Someone's close. Who could it be? Elena flinches as an unfamiliar figure steps out of the darkness. It's a man. Confused and terrified, she asks, "Who are you?" He smirks. Elena recognizes that smile. It's Prince Carlix. He looks down at her, surprised to find someone with golden hair in this place. He never expected to find someone so beautiful in the Duke's household. Carlix had assumed Duke Campbell was hiding military supplies or something else, but not this. A sly fox indeed. His eyes gleam with danger. What is he planning? He steps closer, and Elena's fear grows. She asks again, "Who are you?" Carlix, amused, comments on how terrified she looks, noting her trembling as though she thinks he's here to abduct her. He smiles, enjoying the effect his words have on her. Elena can't make sense of his sudden appearance. Who is he, and how did he get into the palace? Maybe he's a slave trader, one of the outsiders after her hair. That's what she thinks. He stands over her, and Elena's mind races with questions that remain unanswered. She demands that he stay away from her. Carlix, sensing her fear, tells her not to be afraid. He assures her he means no harm. Then, with a more serious tone, he says he's been sent by Lady Adela to find someone named Ella. Does she know her? Elena's eyes light up in shock and joy. Is it true? Is her beloved sister really looking for her? Carlix smiles at her reaction, satisfied. And Elena has no idea just how dangerous this man truly is. Carlix offers his hand to help her up, and Elena, still stunned by the idea of Adela actually sending someone, looks at him with disbelief written all over her face. He repeats his request, saying it's getting a bit embarrassing now. She snaps out of her thoughts and takes his hand. In an instant, he pulls her up with surprising speed. She almost stumbles over him, but he catches her, asking her to be more careful. Elena's heart races, still trying to process everything that's just happened. Their faces are close now, almost too close, in fact, in a moment straight out of a fairy tale. Her heart pounds in her chest as she wonders what's going to happen next. This meeting is just the beginning for them, and Elena has no idea what's in store. Prince Carlix can't help but notice something peculiar about her. There's a certain scent in the air, one that's intoxicating. As he looks at her more closely, he realizes she almost seems to sparkle under the night sky. And then it hits him, the fairy flower. He's been wondering which lady managed to get her hands on it. The fairy flower of legend. It's so rare that even the emperor only managed to get a tiny amount. Carlix, with a mix of curiosity and recognition, grabs a lock of her golden hair. He knows that scent. It's burned into his memory. This is no ordinary fragrance, it's the scent of the fairy flower, something that can never be forgotten once you've smelled it. He takes a deep breath, letting the fragrance overwhelm him. His mind drifts back to his childhood, when he first encountered the fairy flower's aroma. He remembers sneaking into his father's treasure room. There, he found a small vial of luminous oil, glowing golden and enchanting. The scent filled the room, drawing him in with its irresistible allure. That memory, though years old, still feels vivid. Carlix's mind races. If this young woman carries the same scent, then it must have been given to her by his father, the emperor. He sniffs her hair again, absorbed in the memory. Carlix wonders if she's his father's woman, but one thing is clear, the Empress and Alex would never have sent him here if they knew about this golden-haired lady. The Duke has managed to keep her hidden from both the royal family and the public. It feels like fate is at play. Here he is, alone in the garden with the Duke's secret, this lady with golden locks and the intoxicating scent of fairy flowers. The whole situation feels strange. She seems uncomfortable, and Carlix wonders whether he should just take her right then and there. But no, he shakes the thought off. He knows rushing into things won't help. He's always been strategic, always thinking ahead. Acting on impulse could ruin everything, especially if she rejects him. So, he decides to play it slow. His plan is to win her heart, to make her choose him, body and soul. That's his mission now. He'll make her want him willingly. Of course, it's not going to be easy. Everything about her, her flawless skin, her supple body, her beautiful face and those alluring eyes, calls to him, tempting him to give in. He can almost taste the desire, but he forces himself to stay composed. The young mistress shoves him away, demanding he let her go. He immediately moves closer, apologizing, almost like a dog after a bone. He's so consumed by the thought of having her for himself. He apologizes again, claiming he couldn't help it, her scent pulling him closer than he expected. But his thoughts are already far ahead of his words. All he can think of is taking her to his bed. Elena is stunned by his words and his touch, never having experienced anything like this before. Carlix smiles at her, leaning in to say that Lady Adela misses her terribly. He mentions that her sister has been upset because she hasn't received any letters lately. Leaning in even closer, he tells her how disappointed Adela was because there was no one to deliver her letters to her beloved little sister. Carlix then casually mentions that he's now the one in charge of taking on that role for her. At the sound of her sister's name, Elena's face lights up. Hearing that Adela was reading her letters means so much to her. She'd thought they'd just been discarded or burned. Elena is overjoyed, asking if the young man is her sister's knight. The thought that her big sister hadn't forgotten about her fills her with happiness. Carlix, however, reveals he's not Lady Adela's knight, but rather the knight of Prince Carlix, her sister's husband. Elena is stunned. She tells him her recent letters to her beloved sister are in her room and asks him to wait while she goes to get them. Carlix glances around and suggests there's nowhere for him to hide in the garden, so it would be better if they went to her room instead. Elena doesn't hesitate, she follows along, not realizing she's walking right into his plans. That villainous smile of his returns as he imagines the perfect scenario to carry out his intentions. She leads him to a secret passageway in the garden. Elena excitedly explains it's the only one she knows, and Carlix laughs behind her, calling it their secret now. Elena giggles, saying it's only her second secret, and they both laugh together. They walk down a set of stairs, and she stops, telling him they're almost there. She gives him detailed directions to her room as if he's requested them. It's the first room down the corridor to the left when we exit, she says, like an overgrown child giving out all the information he didn't ask for. Carlix surveys the area and realizes this isn't really a secret passage, it's just a side corridor meant for servants to get to their masters quickly, though now it's been abandoned. He smirks, realizing the potential uses of this corridor for his own plans. Elena is clearly unaware of the world beyond her own little bubble, and he intends to exploit that. Elena is excited to meet someone in the castle who's not a maid or her father. This is the first time anyone has visited the castle, she says, practically glowing with happiness. To Carlix, she looks a little too gullible, like she'd believe whatever he told her. It's clear she's easy prey for him. Just then, they hear footsteps, and Elena immediately panics, terrified that someone will see them. She thought she was the only one who knew about the passage, so the idea of someone else hearing them is unsettling. Carlix quickly grabs her hand and rushes her ahead. They make it to her room in no time, and Carlix shuts the door behind them, breathing a sigh of relief. To keep her quiet, he covers her mouth so she won't attract attention. They stay still, listening. After a few seconds, the person outside walks away. Carlix releases her, though he's still standing close, towering over her. Elena's heart is racing from the proximity. He takes in her glowing skin, feeling overwhelmed with the thought of getting closer to her. When would it happen? Today? Tomorrow? The tension between them is palpable, but Carlix knows exactly what he's doing. Carlix is overwhelmed by the intoxicating scent Elena gives off. He can hardly resist the urge to bury his nose in the delicate curve of her neck, inhaling her fragrance. The temptation is nearly unbearable. He imagines what it would be like if he could just take her into his arms and feel her skin beneath his touch. His frustration grows, and he clenches his teeth, trying to hold back his desires. Unable to stop himself, he presses a brief kiss to her neck. Elena, still unaware of his intentions, asks in pure innocence what he's doing. He tells her to relax and speak less, reminding her that the person outside could still be nearby. Elena shudders, clearly uncomfortable, and Carlix smirks, enjoying the reaction. She's never been this close to a man before, and he wonders, will something intimate happen here? But for now, he knows he has to be patient. Ensure to drop a comment below if you want to see a part 2. See you next time.